On July 23, 2025, inside a courtroom in Boise, Idaho, Bryan Kohberger sat motionless as the people whose lives he had shattered addressed him directly. Dylan Mortensen, one of the surviving roommates, stood before the court. She had been 19 years old when Kohberger entered the King Road home in Moscow, Idaho. In her victim impact statement, she described the lasting damage left behind, the loss of safety, the erosion of trust, and the fear that followed her long after the crime scene was cleared. Kaylee Goncalves' father, Steve Goncalves, turned toward Kohberger and spoke plainly. Kaylee's sister, Olivia Goncalves, looked directly at the man convicted of murdering her sister and called him a sociopath. When she finished, members of the courtroom audience applauded. Throughout the proceedings, Kohberger declined to speak. He had been given the opportunity. He chose silence. Judge Stephen Hippler delivered the sentence without hesitation. He described Kohberger as a coward who entered a home and killed 4 young people. The court imposed 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 10 years for burglary and financial penalties totaling $270,000. For many watching, the sentence appeared straightforward. Kohberger had avoided the death penalty and would spend the rest of his life in prison. What received less attention was where that life sentence would be carried out. Kohberger was transferred to the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, located outside Kuna, roughly 20 miles south of Boise. Opened in 1989, the facility was designed to house the state's most violent male offenders. Surrounded by double perimeter fencing reinforced with razor wire and monitored by electronic detection systems, it holds more than 500 inmates. In recent years, the institution has drawn scrutiny over conditions inside its walls. Inmates have reported extended periods of isolation, limited recreation time, and restricted movement. In 2024, a group of inmates staged a hunger strike, citing concerns about medical care, maintenance, and prolonged solitary confinement. Corrections officials have maintained that operations meet constitutional standards, but criticism of maximum security conditions has persisted. This is where Bryan Kohberger will spend the remainder of his life. Following sentencing, he was moved from the Ada County Jail to a restricted housing unit, commonly referred to as J Block. The unit houses approximately 30 inmates and is considered one of the most secure sections of the facility. Kohberger is confined to a single-person cell. Movement outside the cell occurs under restraint. Recreation time, when permitted, takes place in a secured outdoor area. Meals are delivered through a slot in the cell door. Contact with other inmates is minimal and controlled. Among the inmates housed in the same facility are Chad Daybell, sentenced to death for the murders of his first wife and 2 children of his second wife, Thomas Creech, incarcerated for decades for multiple murders, and Gerald Pizzuto, also under a death sentence. The Idaho Maximum Security Institution houses both life-sentenced inmates and those awaiting execution. Shortly after his transfer, reports emerged that Kohberger had requested housing change. Retired homicide detective Chris McDonald, citing sources familiar with the facility, stated that tensions within the unit had developed. According to those accounts, inmates were aware of Kohberger's arrival and directed verbal harassment toward him through the ventilation system connecting cells. Corrections officials do not publicly comment on internal housing disputes, but such dynamics are not uncommon in high-profile cases. Kohberger filed written complaints alleging harassment and threats from other inmates. In prison culture, filing complaints can carry social consequences, though correctional systems provide formal channels for reporting safety concerns. Forensic psychologist Dr. Gary Brucato has explained that high-profile offenders sometimes struggle with the loss of control that follows incarceration. Individuals who once dominated headlines often confront an environment where they have little influence over daily life. The transition from national attention to institutional routine can be psychologically destabilizing. By late 2025, reports indicated that Kohberger had expressed concerns about his housing situation and had threatened self-harm if not relocated. Prison officials reportedly increased monitoring but did not transfer him out of the restricted unit. Corrections protocols require heightened supervision when inmates express potential self-harm. Additional complaints reportedly included grievances about meal quality and other daily conditions. Correctional staff at maximum security institutions often manage heavy workloads in facilities that operate under strict security demands. While Kohberger adjusts to life inside Idaho's most secure prison, the impact of his crimes remains permanent outside its walls. On November 13, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students were stabbed to death inside an off-campus residence on King Road in Moscow, Idaho. Kaylee Goncalves was 21, Madison Mogan was 21, Zaina Kernodle was 20, and Ethan Chapin was 20. Autopsy findings presented during legal proceedings confirmed that the victims suffered multiple stab wounds. Court records indicated that several injuries were defensive in nature. Surviving roommates Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk provided statements describing the emotional toll of the crime. Mortensen spoke about ongoing fear and trauma following the attack. Zaina Kernodle's father, Jeff Kernodle, told the court that he had spoken with his daughter by phone hours before her death. She told him she was not feeling well. He offered to visit. She declined. Investigators have stated that no definitive motive was ever established. Law enforcement did not publicly confirm any prior relationship between Kohberger and the victims. Prosecutors acknowledged that the specific reason the King Road home was targeted may never be known. Bill Thompson, the lead prosecutor, stated that he did not expect a motive to be fully uncovered. FBI profilers involved in the investigation reached similar conclusions. By accepting a plea agreement, Kohberger avoided capital punishment. In Idaho, executions have faced legal and procedural delays in recent years. Thomas Creech, housed in the same institution, survived a halted execution attempt in 2024. The state later designated the firing squad as a primary execution method, though implementation required logistical preparation. Death row inmates in Idaho are housed within the same maximum security complex. Some have spent decades awaiting execution. Their sentences, while indefinite in practice, carry a theoretical endpoint. Kohberger's does not. He will not be eligible for parole. There will be no resentencing hearing. No release date will appear on a calendar. His confinement is permanent. During sentencing, Kaylee Goncalves' mother, Christy Goncalves, addressed Kohberger directly and stated that he would remain under state custody for the rest of his life. 5 months into his incarceration, reports indicate that Kohberger remains housed in restricted confinement. The families of the 4 students continue to live with the absence left behind. The question of whether life without parole was the appropriate sentence, or whether capital punishment should have been imposed, remains a subject of public debate. What is not debated is this: 4 young lives ended in a home in Moscow, Idaho. The man convicted of those killings will spend the rest of his life in a maximum security prison. The motive may never be fully explained. The sentence, however, is final.